What does it take to survive when the world outside turns into a white hell, when the ground disappears under 6 meters of snow and the air itself feels like ice? For most, it means death, but for one 15-year-old girl, it was just another winter. It was January 12, 1888. The Montana High Plains had been under siege for 3 weeks. A blizzard, later known as the Ghost Storm, raged with a fury no one had ever seen. It buried everything. In Salvation, the town huddled in the valley below. The last fires were dying. The weevil-infested grain was gone. Starvation began to settle in, a silence colder than any frost. But on the north face of Shadow Mountain, inside what people called the Gopher's Palace, Evangeline Cromwell knelt in soft, warm earth. She was only 15. The air was humid, smelling of life, a steady 13 degrees Celsius. Water trickled nearby, steam rising from its geothermally heated surface. In the dim light, bouncing off polished mica sheets, she carefully harvested a handful of kale. Her gray mare Misty nickered softly from an adjoining cavern. Misty's coat was thick and healthy. Evangeline stood up, her breath pluming not from cold, but from the effort. She was alone. She was in exile. And for 160 kilometers in any direction, she was the only person who wasn't starving. 2 years before the Ghost Storm, in the spring of 1886, Evangeline was a 13-year-old orphan. 6 months earlier, the very mountain she now called home had claimed her geologist parents. Hunger had become her constant companion. One afternoon, she stood outside Sterling's Emporium, the grandest building in Salvation. Her eyes fixed on a barrel of apples by the door. They were shriveled, bruised remnants from last season, meant only for the pigs. But her stomach twisted with a desperate courage. Her small, dirt-caked hand darted out. It closed around one soft apple. A voice cracked like a whip. "Thief!" Montgomery Sterling, the town's founder and richest man, stood on the boardwalk. His face was a mask of pure indignation. He snatched the apple from her grasp. "Just like your vagrant parents," he sneered. "Always taking what isn't yours." She was dragged before Mayor Abernathy. The man's spine was as soft as his belly. The town council, Sterling and 2 of his cronies, sat in judgment in the mayor's dusty office. Le Maire avoided her eyes. "What do you have to say for yourself, girl?" he asked. Evangeline's voice was small, but it was steady. "I was hungry, sir. They were for the pigs." Sterling slammed his fist on the table. "Property is property," he boomed. "We cannot have vagrancy and theft in a town called Salvation. It is an affront to God and progress." He looked at Evangeline. "She has no family, no means. She is a burden." A cruel glimmer entered his eyes. Her parents filed a claim on that worthless north slope of Shadow Mountain before they died. Let her have it. Let her go there and fend for herself. It was an exile for her crime. It was a death sentence, disguised as a land grant. The north slope was a barren, windswept rock face, considered utterly useless. Mayor Abernathy wrung his hands. "Mr. Sterling," he pleaded, "she's just a child." "A thieving child," Sterling corrected. "She claims her parents taught her things. Let's see what good their rock-hounding nonsense does her now." He turned to Evangeline. "You will take your parents' horse and their tools. You will be gone by sunrise. If you are seen in this valley again, you will be sent to the territorial prison." Evangeline didn't look at Sterling, her eyes fixed on a map on the wall. Her father's voice echoed in her memory, speaking of geological anomalies, of the Earth's warm breath escaping in hidden places. "I can survive there," she said. Her voice was so quiet it was almost swallowed by the room's hostility. "My father showed me the signs. There's warmth in that mountain." Sterling let out a short, barking laugh. "Warmth in the mountain. The girl's gone simple. So be it. Go find your warmth, little thief." Exiled with nothing but her father's maps and a cryptic memory, how could a 13-year-old girl possibly find warmth in the mountain to survive? The next morning, the entire town of Salvation gathered. They watched a 13-year-old girl being sent away. Evangeline loaded her parents' few things onto a sled pulled by Misty, her gray horse. Their tools, the books, the maps drawn so carefully, that was all she had left. Whispers followed her. They buzzed like flies. "Good riddance," muttered Thomas Brennan, the town's builder. He built tall, proud houses of pine, visible for miles. Another man cackled, "The Gopher's Palace. That's what she'll have." The name stuck. Montgomery Sterling stood on his emporium porch. It was a monument to his own success. He was spending $4,000 on a new, modern storehouse. Thick timber walls, a cavernous cellar, a fortress of commerce to secure his legacy. He watched Evangeline, a small figure leading her horse toward the desolate mountain. A surge of righteous satisfaction filled him. For the next 6 months, Evangeline worked with a desperate focus. Her father's detailed maps guided her. She found the spot he marked with a confident X. It was a shallow cave, hidden behind old junipers. Just as he said, a faint, warm vapor rose from a crack at the back. It smelled of sulfur and damp earth. This was the mountain's breath. Her work was brutal. With a pickaxe and shovel, she dug. She expanded the cave, following the main lava tube deeper into the rock. Misty was her only help. The loyal mare dragged sleds loaded with rock and dirt out of the growing cavern. Evangeline was small, but her muscles hardened like steel. She learned the rock's rhythms, where to pry, where to dig. She timbered the ceilings with logs she found. Her father, who had worked briefly in a mine, taught her how. It cost nothing but her own sweat and time. She found the heat source, a small steaming spring. It bubbled deep from the earth, then disappeared back into another crack. This was the heart of her plan. With painstaking effort, she diverted some hot water. She carved a shallow channel along the wall. This created both warmth and humidity. The main cavern was 15 meters long and 6 meters wide. She built a section for Misty. It was deep enough to be safe from the wind, but close enough to the entrance for air. The final crucial element was light. The cave entrance faced north, so it got no direct sun, but her mother, a keen-eyed naturalist, taught her about reflection. Her parents found mica deposits on their land. Evangeline spent weeks splitting the mineral. She made thin, shimmering sheets. She fixed these to the cave walls opposite the entrance. They became a series of dull mirrors. They didn't make light, but they gathered what little existed. They amplified it, casting a pale, ethereal glow over the interior. On the cavern floor, she built terraced garden beds. She mixed rich volcanic soil with guano from a nearby bat colony. Then she planted her mother's heirloom seeds, hardy kale, chard, potatoes, carrots, and spores for mushrooms that loved low light and humidity. Sometimes hunters on the high ridges would spot her, a small, solitary figure covered in dirt. They brought tales back to salvation. "That Cromwell girl is still up there," one would report at the general store. "Digging like a badger, looks half wild." The slang term was born then. When a man took on a pointless, back-breaking task, his friends would shake their heads. They'd say he was going Cromwell. It meant wasting your life on a fool's errand, ignoring common sense for a mad dream. The children in town had a cruel rhyme. Evangeline Cromwell dug her own hell. She heard it once on a rare trip to the river at the base of the mountain. She never went back. By the first snows of her second winter, in late 1887, her sanctuary was complete. The world outside could freeze, but inside the Gopher's Palace, it was perpetually spring. The first tender green shoots pushed through the soil. She felt a quiet, fierce joy. It wasn't a house. It was a system. It was life. With her sanctuary complete, Evangeline faced a new challenge, predicting the mountain's wrath and preparing for a winter no one else believed was coming. The next autumn, in 1888, Evangeline saw the signs clearly. She was attuned to every whisper of the mountain. The tiny rock rabbits, the pikas of the high country, gathered winter grass with a frenzy she had never seen. Marmots went into hibernation a full month early. The wind from the north had a new, razor-sharp edge. Her father had taught her to trust the animals. They held the ancient wisdom of survival. She spent weeks hauling extra firewood, stacking it near the cave entrance. Not for warmth, but for cooking. She reinforced the hide flap that covered the cave mouth. She double-checked the seals on her small store of dried meat. Down in Salvation, they were celebrating. It was the greatest harvest in memory. The fields had yielded a bumper crop. Montgomery Sterling's new $4,000 storehouse was filled to the rafters with wheat and corn. Sterling stood before the town council. "Providence has smiled upon us," he declared. "This town, a beacon of prosperity, is secure for the winter. No one here shall know hunger." They toasted his foresight with whiskey. They laughed at the memory of the foolish orphan girl, probably already frozen solid in her mountain grave. On October 29, 1888, the sky turned a strange, bruised purple. The air grew unnaturally still. Then it hit, the ghost storm. It came not as a gentle snowfall. It was a solid wall of white, moving at 100 kilometers per hour. The temperature dropped 28 degrees Celsius in less than 60 minutes. From a balmy 4 degrees Celsius to 23 degrees below zero. The town of Salvation was caught completely unprepared. The fine, proud houses built by Thomas Brennan became ice boxes. Their large windows and high ceilings offered no protection. The wind tore shingles from the roofs and shattered glass. Within days, the snow was so deep it buried the houses to their eaves, blocking doors and chimneys. Roofs groaned under the immense weight. The town hall was the first to go. Its grand clock tower collapsed with a sound swallowed by the storm. Sterling's magnificent new storehouse, his monument to pride, became his prison. Massive drifts sealed the doors shut. The wood, not properly cured in the rush to build, shrank in the intense cold. Fine, biting snow blew through the cracks. It contaminated the sacks of grain near the walls. While Salvation collapsed under the ghost storm, Evangeline's Gopher's palace faced its ultimate test. Will her system truly hold against nature's fury? High in her mountain refuge, Evangeline was safe and warm. The storm screamed outside. It sounded like a distant, angry animal. Snow piled up, burying the cave entrance, but it just made a perfect shield. Inside, the air stayed at a steady 13 degrees Celsius. She lit a small tallow lamp. Its light flickered as she checked her gardens. The kale grew thick and green. She milked her 2 goats. She had traded for them months ago with a trapper passing through. Their pen was warm and safe in a side cavern, right next to Misty. Evangeline ate a simple meal. Roasted potatoes and steamed chard. She listened to the gentle drip of her indoor spring. She wasn't just surviving the storm, she was thriving because of it. Her home was built to welcome the wild. For 3 weeks, the ghost storm raged. Then, a strange silence fell. The sky cleared to a brilliant, unforgiving blue. But the danger wasn't over. Outside, the temperature held at 29 degrees below zero. The snowpack was like solid iron. Down in Salvation, despair turned to real horror. A group of men finally managed to tunnel into Sterling's storehouse. What they found was a disaster. Moisture from the snow, mixed with weevils already in the grain, had turned everything into foul, moldy slush. The town's entire winter food supply was gone. Starvation began its grim work. The old and the weak were the first to go. Families huddled in the dark. They chewed on leather straps, trying to trick their empty bellies. Then, young Thomas spoke up. He was the builder's son, only 18. His younger sister was fading right in front of him. "What about the Cromwell girl?" he asked his father. His voice was thin. Thomas Brennan scoffed. It was a weak, rattling sound in his chest. "She's dead, son. Long dead." "But what if she isn't?" the boy insisted. What if she was right about the warmth in the mountain? It was a sliver of hope, so faint it felt like madness. But it was all they had left. Thomas gathered 3 other young men. They made crude snowshoes from floorboards. They took no food. There was none to take. Their 2-day journey to Shadow Mountain was a frozen hell. One man turned back. His feet were too frostbitten to go on. The other 2 collapsed 90 meters from the hidden cave entrance. Their strength was utterly spent. Thomas staggered on. He called Evangeline's name until his throat was raw. He fell. He was sure he was about to die. Then he saw it. A faint wisp of smoke, almost invisible against the white snow. He crawled toward it. He found the cave entrance, a narrow tunnel dug through the massive drift, just wide enough for one person. Evangeline found him there, unconscious. She and Misty dragged him and his companions inside. She stripped off their frozen clothes. She wrapped them in warm goat hides. She revived them slowly with warm, salty broth. When Thomas finally opened his eyes, the first thing he saw was Evangeline. Her face was framed by the pale green of living plants. He thought he had died and gone to heaven. She said nothing of the past, nothing of their mockery. She just fed them. The stew she gave them was the most glorious meal they had ever tasted. Rich with rabbit meat, potatoes, carrots, and kale, it was the taste of life itself. If this kind of story of forgotten wisdom meeting impossible odds is something you want more of, subscribe. The truth Thomas carried back to salvation would change everything. Thomas felt a shock go through him. He had been close to death. Now he was alive. He knew he had to get back to salvation. The news he carried was a spark for a dying town. A miracle. The journey back was hard, but Thomas made it. Soon, the exodus began. Desperate families pulled their children on makeshift sleds. They stumbled through the deep snow, one step at a time. Evangeline's cave became a refuge. First, one family arrived, then 5, then 20. She took them all in. The Gopher's Palace, once a joke, became their only sanctuary. She was no longer just a girl, she was a leader. She organized everyone with quiet strength. She rationed her stored food with careful fairness. She showed the women and older children how to pick greens without hurting the plants. She taught them to care for the mushroom beds. The men, weak and humbled, followed the directions of the girl they had thrown out. She taught them how to set traps for the snowshoe hares that lived near the warm vents outside. She taught them to fish in the part of the river that never froze. This was because of the same underground heat that warmed her home. No one talked about the past, there was only survival. Then, in late March, the great thaw finally arrived. The survivors came out of the mountain. They stepped into a world of ruin. They walked down to salvation. The devastation was complete. Nearly 40 people, a third of the town, had died. All the livestock was gone. The buildings were shattered. It was not a town, it was a graveyard with roofs. A week later, what was left of the community gathered. They met in the shell of the ruined church. Montgomery Sterling stood up. His expensive suit hung loose on his bony frame. He walked to the front. He didn't look at the preacher or the mayor. He looked straight at Evangeline Cromwell. His voice, once loud and sure, was now a raw, broken whisper. "I called you a fool," he said. "I was the fool." He took a shaky breath. The shame in the air was heavy. "We all laughed. We called your home a grave. It became our ark." Sterling paused, his eyes fixed on the young woman. "I built my storehouse with pride. It was a monument to myself. It cost about £3,200. It became a tomb for our food. You built your home with wisdom, and it sheltered us all." He looked at the tired faces of his neighbors, then back at the young woman who had saved them. "I have never been more wrong about anything in my life. I have some money left, I have my hands, but I have no wisdom. I'm not too proud to beg. Teach me, teach us." Mayor Abernathy wept openly. He echoed Sterling's plea. The entire town looked at Evangeline. Their eyes were full of desperate, humbling hope. Evangeline stepped forward. Her face was calm. Her voice was clear, without any hint of triumph. "What good is wisdom if it isn't shared?" she asked the silent crowd. "Come, I'll show you everything." And she did. Having learned the hard way, how would salvation rebuild, and what kind of new community would rise from the ashes of their pride, guided by Evangeline's wisdom? Montgomery Sterling didn't rebuild his grand emporium. Instead, he used what money he had left to buy tools and supplies for everyone. They didn't even try to rebuild salvation in the old valley. Evangeline led them up the mountain to its base. She showed them how to read the land, to find the subtle signs of geothermal warmth. They built a new kind of town there. It was a series of connected homes, dug right into the hillside. The mountain's own breath warmed them. Clever light shafts facing north brought light deep inside. They planted huge terrace gardens within these new structures. The old insult, "going Cromwell," changed completely. It became a new verb. It meant to create abundance from nothing. It meant finding hope even in barren rock. Evangeline never married, but she adopted 3 children, all orphaned by the ghost storm. She became the quiet leader of the community. No one questioned her. People didn't revere her for wealth or power. They respected her for a wisdom that ran as deep as the earth itself. She lived to be 78, dying peacefully in her sleep. Her simple, warm home was right next to her original cave. The whole town came to her funeral. People even traveled from settlements hundreds of kilometers away. In the spring of 1890, the territorial government made it official. The town of Salvation, with all its painful memories of pride and ruin, was erased from the maps. In its place, a new name appeared: Cromwell's Crossing. It was the highest honor they could give her. Her first cave, the Gopher's Palace that became their ark, was kept. It became a permanent museum to her foresight. Her faithful gray mare, Misty, who had hauled all the rocks for the cave, lived a long life. She was buried in the lush meadow below the settlement. That meadow bloomed only because a 13-year-old girl, exiled for stealing a shriveled apple, knew the secrets of the earth. The others built for the world they wanted. She built for the world as it is. Only one approach survived. You just saw how 2 very different ways of thinking played out. One side built for the world they wanted it to be. The other built for the world as it is. Only one approach survived. This story shows us a core truth. Real foresight means building for the world you actually live in, not the one you wish for. And true progress? It starts with humility. It means listening to what the world tells you, even when it's hard to hear. It means adapting, learning, and letting go of pride. Subscribe if this kind of real-world wisdom is something you want more of. And tell me in the comments, what's one thing you've learned from experience that completely changed how you see the world? The content of this video is for educational and storytelling purposes. The events, characters, and names depicted are fictionalized for narrative effect, though the technical principles and historical context are based on real practices. The construction techniques described are historical and may not meet modern building codes or safety standards. Any application of these principles should be undertaken with professional guidance and in compliance with all current laws and regulations. This video does not constitute professional, technical, or legal advice.